FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's Kerry, Lutz. And what's going on in the world? Well, teachers are off to prison while the bankers continue to rack up the profits. Here to talk about it, Danielle Park, jugglingdynamite.com. Danielle, how are you?
Hey, Kerry, I'm great. Thanks.
So on your blog, you got an article posted or a summary from Bill Black. We send teachers to prison. Why not bankers too? Well, teachers only make on average $50,000 to $70,000 a year. Unless you're a New York City teacher, then you don't even have to teach and you get paid $100,000. So what about this?
So a jury in Atlanta convicted this week a number 11 teachers for their roles in a standardized test cheating scandal, and they basically were rigging the test results to make it look like students were meeting the targets that they'd been given. And there was a bunch of teachers and testing coordinators, administrators were all involved, and they found them all guilty of these charges of making false statements, and they could get years in prison for it. It's the thing that Bill Black highlights, and which I find so outrageous, is that not that this is good behavior, that they shouldn't be found guilty if they're in breach of the law in these ways, and that's totally legitimate. But they're billing this as the largest cheating scandal in the nation's history, which, of course, anyone who's been following Wall Street and Company the past few years has to go, oh, come on. This is buttons. This is like little chump change buttons that they're getting these incentives to, career incentives and bonuses for hitting these targets. But this is nothing like the multi-trillion-dollar frauds that have been being widely conducted by our banking elites all over the world. And of course, none of them have gone to jail or been, prosecuted even for their incredible fraud acts. So it is another statement of the hypocrisy and the complete lack of fairness right now in our legal system, that you can get prosecutions and convictions and in something like this, but not in anything that really has a lot of zeros attached to it.
Well, I guess the Wall Street lobby is a lot stronger than the teachers' lobby in Atlanta. But to be fair, the Atlanta teachers were really doing great harm to the students that were under their control, as the banksters on Wall Street. But the justification for what the teachers in Atlanta were doing, I mean, that was really, really bad.
Oh, absolutely. And I would argue that there's a fiduciary duty owed from teachers to students, but there is a similar fiduciary duty owed from financial advisors, people who are giving advice to, trusting souls, and then, taking turning that advice so that it literally harms the recipient. And so they make off like bandits. And then not only that, but after they blow up, even after they've gorged on all these illicit profits themselves, the banksters, when they blow up the institutions from their rampant greed, they then turn to the taxpayers and take the money from the public purse. So I would say that, I'm not trying to say that the teachers weren't culpable and that this isn't fair that they're prosecuted. What I'm saying is it underlines how outrageously lenient the prosecution attempts have been on the banking cartel.
Well, lenient really isn't the word. It's been non-existent. Yeah. I mean, they just let these bastards run free and keep getting bonuses. And look, the analogy's been made, the comparison so many times, Danielle, to the savings and loan debacle that took place in the 80s. Over 1,000 guys went to jail during that. And the only guy that got prosecuted here, when you look at Michael Lewis's book, was a guy who took some code from Goldman Sachs, and the code was really not even proprietary or anything, but they went after him. He got prosecuted finally the Second Circuit had to set him free, and that was it. Nobody else got prosecuted at all. In fact, they got rewarded.
And the evidence here is so thick and deep and so widespread. I mean, pick a country, pick a city. You and I were just talking about Chicago having enormous financial problems right now. Their pension deficits being one of the main drivers of that. Everywhere you look, every cupboard you open that's supposed to have stored food for the winter is bare today. And it's bare today because the fiduciaries, the people that were supposed to be looking after the financial health of whether it be clients, whether it be cities, municipalities, governments, agencies, everywhere, they have literally robbed it blind. And so you've got deficits as far as the eye can see. And it's in governments, it's in corporations, and there's this gambling mentality, this short-termism gambling mentality, which again, I rarely quote Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, but he wrote a piece this week on our gambling culture. And I think he makes extremely good points in there as well. Just saying, it's not one thing. It's not just that the government's in cahoots with the banks. It's not just that the academics at the head of the central banks are, controlled by their true clients, which are the banks themselves. It's not just that, corporations are incented by the wrong things to gouge out profits from the net worth of the companies. It's everything. It's that people are willing to follow false prophets, that they're willing to listen to nonsense that's financially devastating to them just because they don't want to hear truth. And truth is, guess what? You don't have enough savings. You have to work longer. You have to save more. You have to be more conservative in what you're doing. People don't like to hear truth anymore, Kerry, because it's easier to believe in the lies and the erroneous facts, I guess. But at the end of the day, you're paying one way and another, and you're paying hard the other way. I mean, the way the world is today, we're all paying, and we are going to continue to pay for many years here for all the bad financial decisions that have been made.
Yeah, we're going to pay for decades, perhaps generations. I mean, if it gets as bad as it can get in the U.S., we might pay forever in terms of the damage inflicted on the United States, and that goes for Canada too.
Yeah, and you saw that piece PBS did on Canada just recently saying, that we're headed off a financial cliff. And when I've been writing about it because I'm close to the data up here, but, this, anyone that's sort of just thinking about the conservative little Canadians, surely they've got their fiscal house in order, and they turn and look at it and go, oh my God, they've got the highest household debt, in the world. They've got the most, revenues plunging now with the oil debacle, and nobody prepared for a rainy day at all up here. We've got the most overvalued housing. I mean, like, our housing market is literally, on a par with some of the hot spots in the U.S. in 2006 before your big collapse. So, and everyone up here is hoping they get away with something. Again, hoping that you can. Oh, here's a trend that I read about recently, Kerry. This was a new one to me, but basically, regular homeowners in Canada who were still considered good credits are borrowing against their house at 2.5%, 3%, and then loaning that money to high risk mortgagers. So, and making a spread on the money. But the problem is, of course, now you've got highly levered real estate levered off each other like a piggy bank, like dominoes, and nobody with enough cash. No one thinking that, everyone forgetting that liquidity means you have to actually have cash to meet bills, not just bubble pricing on balance sheets. So that's why I say it's so interconnected at the moment. But, here's a positive story, Kerry, that I like this week. You know how we've been talking about the disaster in the fact that the boomers are all, getting older, and the young people can't get a foothold because asset prices are too high. It's hard for them to buy houses. It's hard for them to get good paying jobs and wages and things. Mm-hmm. And students are encumbered with huge debt. But I put the story on this week of in the Netherlands, how they're now offering free room and board to university or college students if they will take rooms in retirement homes. And so they get to live there by giving 30 hours of their time a week to the residents of the retirement home. So helping them with various tasks that they need done around the place, being not just company, but actually assisting them in various things. So we're not talking palliative care here. This is a retirement home, not a hospital setting. But sure. I thought there's part of if you want a positive idea about how you fix some of this stuff, it's people having a humble admission of the nonsense and BS that's been going on and saying, you know what, I personally can't afford to go to school and have a car and have all these trappings. Can I live at that place? I'll give you some of my time and I will get an education without having to go in the debt. This is where we cut banks and lenders out of the equation and go back to individuals actually helping each other. And that's the kind of thing I think which will ultimately fix all this.
Yeah, maybe they can put some of these kids here in bankruptcy courts to do internships so they can learn about financial irresponsibility. I had this great idea, Danielle, about kids who, before they go into debt to go to college to get meaningless degrees, before they do all this, in the U.S., we have this thing called the reverse mortgage. You know about them?
Yes. Yeah. They have them in Canada too.
Yeah, it's so stupid. There's no reason for that thing to exist. Before you go do a reverse mortgage, you should sell the damn house. Okay? Get rid of the house.
Admit that you can't have the money and have the house too. Yeah.
You should sell the stupid house. Okay? The reverse mortgage should not exist because basically, if you're not familiar with a reverse mortgage, you actually borrow a significant portion of the value of the house. And then you never make any more payments on the house. And the deal is when you die, the house gets sold and the mortgage theoretically will be paid off. Your obligation is to pay the taxes and to maintain the home and to, if there's an HOA, homeowners association, to make payments to the HOA. And as it turns out, somewhere around 60% of these reverse mortgages wind up in default and they're federally guaranteed. And Uncle Sam, being such a great guy that he is just selling them off at the auction block, especially down here in Florida, in record numbers. They shouldn't exist, right? There's no reason for these things to exist. So now, after the mortgage collapse, there's a requirement in the U.S. that elderly, because you have to be 65 or older to get one of these, you have to take a course, financial counseling, before you get a reverse mortgage. And you can actually buy a house and get a reverse mortgage on it, but you didn't know that. And there's a whole bunch of tricks of the trade. I learned this because I consulted to a mortgage bank, and I'm just like shaking my head saying, this is the ultimate act of financial implosion, suicide, you name it. This is idiocy. These things shouldn't exist. But
the problem is all over the world, they have the financial architects of these products, the people that are making the profits off of them, offering quote courses to teach people about financial acumen. And that's where, everyone ends up in the ditch and that's something that Canadians used to be more conservative with debt than our American counterparts. And I did notice that. I find that even today, Americans are much more comfortable carrying mortgage debt into their later years, into retirement. They've always sort of seen it as a natural state of affairs, whereas traditionally in Canada, it was something that one aimed to always have paid off before they were looking to retire. Right. Well, no more, because today you've got a lot of people in their late 50s and 60s still carrying really significant mortgage debt. But, hey, listen, I have real estate in Canada, and I know very well that I could lose 30% of the value of that property, and that would just put us back in sort of normal, range of affordability historically. So I think, I guess it's just admitting the truth about all this stuff and stopping the charade and the mirage and keeping up with the Joneses and all this stuff. And I mean, we've got Ben Bernanke now doing the victory lap all over the world, getting paid $250,000 bucks to talk about how he, helped to crash the greatest economy in the world with his, enforcing interest rates down over time and forcing consumption at all costs and bailing out the banks. And, so as long as we're still revering those figureheads as the people that we want to pay big bucks to go here, it's the same as having the mortgage sellers come and give a seminar on how to be smart with money. Guess what? They're going to talk about how to use levered loans to, quote, invest. At some point, we just have to come to our senses and say, we just can't keep taking this bad advice. I mean, there was another piece that we were alluding to earlier, that Mohammed Al-Larian, so he's the former PIMCO CEO, as you know, and he works as an economic advisor to PIMCO's parent company. But he basically pulled back from the mainstream, the frontline selling financial products gig, which is what PIMCO does, right? They sell funds that they manage. They're incredibly lucrative. He got paid something like $250 million as a bonus, a year ago the year before he quit. I mean, the man's worth a couple of $1 billion, Kerry, which he got not by, quote, investing in stocks and bonds, but by selling people the idea and the belief in investing in stocks and bonds, right? So anyway, but he now is not on the front line of the sales machine. He's doing an interview this week, and they're saying to him, geez, well, what do you do with all your savings? Because surely you're very sophisticated, can afford all kinds of risk. You're a very wealthy man. And he says, well, actually, it's mostly concentrated in cash today. And the interviewer says, what? Well, why?
Yeah.
Says, well, I know it's not ideal, but really, if you look at it, he says, asset prices have been so pushed to such crazy levels by central banks that really it's just, insane to be participating in them. And if you got to keep it's more about keeping your safety and your capital away from harm right now than it is about pushing it to, quote, make you return. So I think, every time that one of those people comes out from behind the curtain and says, what, here's the truth about that. And then probably another financial, disaster will force more capitulation and sense of, revulsion at some of these leaders. But basically, the more people are prepared to say, this is my numbers, this is the math, and this is what works, and this is what doesn't, and teaching. I know it's easy to criticize the youth. And, as I say, it's easier to believe the nonsense than it is to be told you can't afford a car while you're going to school, as an example, right? Or that you can't, go on vacations while you're living on student loans and that sort of thing. It's easier to believe that you can than that to understand that you can't. But at the same time, we have done a terrible job of teaching our youth, and baby boomer parents have been the worst financial leaders pretty much in history.
So here's my concept. Okay. So you got to get counseled to get a reverse mortgage. People are still doing it, obviously, because it's a no-brainer, because you get to stay in your house. If you don't care about your heirs and you want to stay in the house, seems to make sense. Why not, before you go to college, before you take out a student loan, you got to get counseling, financial counseling, where you explore every possible option, from going to community college to taking AP courses in high school, because in the U.S. here, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, Danielle, AP courses that you take in high school, you actually get college credit for them. And all these things that you can do to cut back on the cost of college education. There's a way in community college, you can overload your credits. So you could take more credits than the community college actually requires you to take, to overload credits. And then if you go to a state school in that same state where the community college is located, the state school has to accept all the credits you got in community college. So you might only have to go for less than a year to the state college. All the credits you took in the community college get applied to your major, and you knocked off a year of senior college. We used to call it junior college. Now it's community college. You knocked off a year at the state school and that debt. I mean, there's so many things that you can do to save money.
obviously education is important. It's not that education's a bad thing ever. It's just that we have a common theme here, Kerry, and it's government funding fueling bubbles in valuations in post-secondary education, as well as in housing, as well as in stocks and bonds, all of it. Because once you get the balloon hooked onto the nozzle of public funds, then it just gets bigger every year. And all of a sudden, these ridiculous increases are affordable, and you get schools that become like these massive for-profit corporations billowing, and the CEOs taking millions in profits out of, feeling like they're running the world. But the only way it could get that way is if people are given insatiable amounts of debt. Because if your clientele can't afford your service and can't access ridiculous amounts of debt, guess what? You're going to have to lower your price or run your operation more efficiently, or you won't have customers. And the same goes for everything else. So the theme here is the same. It's because we've allowed runaway debt to be billowed out of the government into the public sector, into the private sector. And it's transcended everywhere. So that's the line we've got to stop. We've got to stop corporate welfare. We've got to stop endless amounts of capital going into government-funded or backed mortgages, government-funded or backed education loans, all of it. And that's the financial complex. The financial complex has been running the world, and they're in the business of selling that stuff. And that's why we're all up to the eyebrows in it.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. It's so true. And the time to do something about it is now. And it really comes down to education at every level. But especially if you're going to get an education, start your education, your higher education, with financial education about the debt that you're taking on to get that education, right?
Right. Absolutely. I had someone recently who didn't take a full scholarship offering because they wanted to go to a different school, and they took a student loan to fund the different school tuition and education. And I wanted to show them the math of it, because if you looked at the numbers, the argument that you would be so much further ahead with the same degree from a slightly different university would not make any sense at all. When you looked at how far behind the eight ball you were going to come out of school having to service debt versus having it all paid for, you're years and years behind the other scenario. So, that kind of thing. If people could do more of that math, Kerry, in advance, instead of going on what sounds good, the marketing end of it, the window dressing, the ego part, if they could just get a little more focused on what makes sense, we would be just so much further ahead.
A great point. And on that note, we will talk to you in a couple of weeks. Make sure you visit Danielle's site, jugglingdynamite.com. She's got her podcast on there, her monthly commentary, and so much more. And while you're at it, check out financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Our webmaster, Stefan, does an incredible job finding articles that I can't believe he finds on so many sites, hundreds of different sites around the world, from just information that you can't believe is out there. You really do yourself a service checking it out. For many of you out there, thousands, it's your go-to site every morning. Sign up on our mailing list. Got webinars coming up. And Danielle, till 2 weeks, we will talk to you then.
Thanks, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Every week the show is growing. Would you like to be a part of it? Then go to clubfsn.com and help support us with $1, $2, $5, or $10 a month and get a host of premium content with newsletters dropped into your mailbox, free books, private audio clips, webinars, and much more. Then join clubfsn.com. If you want to get ahead of the trend and ensure your family's financial security before it's too late, go to clubfsn.com and sign up.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.